At my cousin's baby shower, my aunt pulled me aside and said, "We need you to cover the catering. It's $2,800, but family helps family." I nodded and transferred the money. Then I overheard her whisper to my mom, "He's so gullible. I already paid for everything." That night, I reversed the transfer and blocked her number. The next morning, she called 31 times from different phones. I, 32M, never thought my own family would play me for a fool, but here we are. Last Saturday changed everything I thought I knew about the people I've called family my entire life. My cousin was having her baby shower, and like always, I showed up ready to help. I've been the family's go-to guy for years whenever money got tight or someone needed a favor. Good job, no kids, always willing to lend a hand. That's me, the reliable one. The shower was at my aunt's house, decorated with pink balloons and those tiny baby shoes hanging from ribbons. About 30 people milled around, mostly women cooing over baby clothes and playing guessing games. I was helping set up tables when my aunt approached me with that look I'd seen before, the one that meant she needed something. She pulled me into the kitchen, away from the crowd. Her voice dropped to that conspiratorial whisper she used when discussing family business. She told me there was a problem with the catering. The company was demanding payment up front, and she was short on cash. $2,800 short, to be exact. She explained how the family had already committed to this shower, how my cousin was counting on everything being perfect, and how disappointed everyone would be if the food didn't show up. Then came the line that always worked on me: family helps family. I looked at her face, saw what appeared to be genuine worry, and felt that familiar tug in my chest. This was my family. My cousin was having her first baby. How could I let them down over money? I pulled out my phone right there in the kitchen and transferred the money. $2,800, gone in 30 seconds. My aunt's relief seemed genuine. She hugged me, thanked me repeatedly, and promised she'd pay me back as soon as she could. I told her not to worry about it, that I was happy to help. And I meant it. At that moment, I felt good about what I'd done. The shower continued without a hitch. The catered food arrived on schedule, beautifully presented and delicious. My cousin was glowing, opening gifts and laughing with friends. Everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. I mingled, made small talk, and felt that warm satisfaction that comes from helping family. But then I needed to use the bathroom. I was walking down the hallway when I heard voices from the living room. My aunt was talking to my mom in hushed tones, probably thinking everyone was too busy with the party to overhear. But the acoustics in that old house carried sound in strange ways, and I caught every word. My aunt was telling my mom how easy it had been to get the money from me. She laughed as she described my reaction, calling me gullible and naive. The worst part was when she revealed the truth. She'd already paid for the catering weeks ago. The whole sob story about being short on cash was completely fabricated. She'd seen an opportunity to get some extra money and decided to take advantage of my generosity. My mom's response made it even worse. Instead of being shocked or defending me, she chuckled and agreed that I was too trusting for my own good. They talked about me like I was some kind of mark, an easy target they could manipulate whenever they needed cash. I stood there in that hallway, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. The sounds of the party continued around me, but everything felt different now. The laughter seemed hollow, the conversations meaningless. I'd been played, and apparently, this wasn't the first time they'd discussed my gullibility. I managed to compose myself and rejoin the party, but my mind was racing. Every interaction felt different now. When my aunt smiled at me, I wondered what she was really thinking. When other family members thanked me for helping with the shower, I questioned whether they knew about the scam. The rest of the afternoon dragged by. I went through the motions, helped clean up, said my goodbyes, and drove home in a daze. But by the time I reached my apartment, the shock had transformed into something else entirely: cold, calculated anger. I spent that evening researching my options. The bank transfer was recent enough that I could potentially reverse it, but I needed to act quickly. I also started thinking about the bigger picture. This wasn't just about the money. It was about respect, trust, and the way my family saw me. Around midnight, I made my decision. I called my bank's emergency line and explained that I needed to reverse a fraudulent transfer. The representative was helpful and understanding, especially when I explained that I'd been deceived about the purpose of the payment. Within an hour, the reversal was processed. But I wasn't done. I blocked my aunt's number, along with several other family members who I suspected might be in on the joke. If they wanted to treat me like a fool, they could figure out their own problems from now on. I went to bed that night feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because I'd taken control of the situation, sadness because I'd lost something I could never get back: my trust in my family. The next morning started early. My phone began ringing at 7 a.m. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, different number. Then another. By the time I finished my morning coffee, I'd received 15 calls from various numbers. The voicemails told the story. My aunt had discovered the reverse transfer and was frantically trying to reach me. Her tone evolved from confused to angry to desperate as the calls continued. She'd apparently borrowed money from other family members to cover the catering cost, thinking my payment was secure. Now she was scrambling to explain why the money had disappeared. By noon, the call count had reached 31. She was using every phone she could find. Her husband's cell, her work phone, neighbors' phones, even what sounded like a payphone at one point. Each voicemail became more frantic than the last. The family network was buzzing. My mom called from her own phone, demanding to know what was happening. My uncle left a message saying there must be some mistake. Even my cousin called, crying about how her perfect day was being ruined by family drama. But I wasn't answering any of them. Instead, I was documenting everything. Screenshots of the bank transfer and reversal, recordings of the voicemails, notes about the conversation I'd overheard. If this was going to become a family war, I wanted to be prepared. Update 1. The calls finally stopped around 3 p.m., but the real fireworks were just beginning. My aunt had apparently driven to my apartment building and was buzzing my intercom repeatedly. I watched from my window as she paced back and forth in the parking lot, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. I didn't go down to meet her. Around 5 p.m., my mom showed up. Unlike my aunt, she had a key to the building from when she'd helped me move in. I heard her footsteps in the hallway, then her knock on my door. She called my name, said she knew I was home, and demanded that I open up and explain myself. I opened the door, but kept the chain lock engaged. Through the gap, I could see her face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. She told me that my aunt was in serious trouble, that she'd promised money to the caterer that she no longer had, and that I was being selfish and vindictive. I asked her if she remembered the conversation I'd overheard. Her expression changed immediately. The anger faltered, replaced by something that looked like guilt. She tried to explain it away, saying they were just joking, that family members tease each other, that I was being too sensitive. I told her that stealing money wasn't teasing. I explained that I'd heard every word, that I knew the catering had already been paid for, and that I was done being the family's personal ATM. Her face went pale as she realized how much I'd actually heard. She tried a different approach then, appealing to my sense of family loyalty. She reminded me of all the times my aunt had helped me when I was younger, all the family gatherings she'd hosted, all the ways she'd been there for the family over the years. She said that one mistake shouldn't destroy decades of family relationships. I told her that it wasn't one mistake. It was a calculated deception designed to steal money from me. And based on their conversation, it wasn't the first time they discussed my gullibility. I asked her how many other times I'd been manipulated without knowing it. She couldn't answer that question. I closed the door and listened as she stood in the hallway for several minutes before finally leaving. Through my window, I watched her meet my aunt in the parking lot. They had what appeared to be a heated discussion before both of them drove away. The evening brought a new wave of family intervention. My uncle called, trying to play peacemaker. He acknowledged that what my aunt had done was wrong, but he emphasized that family should stick together through difficult times. He offered to mediate a conversation between us, to help us work through this misunderstanding. I told him it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft, and I wasn't interested in mediation with someone who deliberately deceived me. My cousin called next, and this conversation was the hardest one yet. She was crying, explaining how the family drama was overshadowing what should have been one of the happiest days of her life. She said she didn't know about her mother's plan, that she was just as shocked as I was, and that she was caught in the middle of something she didn't create. I believed her, but I also told her that her mother's actions had consequences, and those consequences weren't my responsibility to fix. I'd been manipulated and stolen from, and I wasn't going to pretend it didn't happen just to keep the peace. She asked what it would take for me to forgive her mother. I told her the truth. I didn't know if forgiveness was possible. Trust, once broken this completely, might never be repaired. Update 2. The next few days brought an interesting development. Word of the incident had spread through the extended family network, and the reactions were more divided than I'd expected. Some family members were appalled by my aunt's behavior and reached out to express their support. Others seemed to think I was overreacting and should just let it go for the sake of family harmony. My grandmother called on Wednesday. She was 92 years old and had seen enough family drama to fill several lifetimes. She told me she'd heard about the situation and wanted to share her perspective. She said that what my aunt had done was wrong, but that holding grudges would only hurt me in the long run. I respected my grandmother's opinion, but I also explained that this wasn't about holding a grudge. It was about setting boundaries and refusing to be taken advantage of. I told her that I'd spent years being the family's financial safety net, and I'd just discovered that some family members saw me as nothing more than an easy mark. She was quiet for a long moment before telling me that she understood my position. She said that respect was a two-way street. and that my aunt had failed to show me the respect I deserved. She also mentioned that she'd heard rumors over the years about my aunt's financial management, and that this incident might not be as isolated as it appeared. That conversation gave me a lot to think about. If my grandmother, the family matriarch, was acknowledging that my aunt had a pattern of questionable behavior, maybe I wasn't the only one who'd been manipulated. I started reaching out to other family members, not to gossip or create drama, but to understand the full scope of the situation. What I discovered was disturbing. My aunt had apparently borrowed money from several family members over the years, often with sob stories about unexpected expenses or temporary cash flow problems. Some of these loans had never been repaid. My uncle on my father's side told me about a time 3 years ago when my aunt had asked him for money to fix her car. He'd given her $800, only to see her driving the same supposedly broken car for months afterward. When he'd asked about the repairs, she'd given him a vague story about finding a cheaper mechanic. My cousin on my mother's side had a similar story about a medical emergency that had turned out to be fabricated. She'd given my aunt $1,200 for what she thought was an urgent procedure, only to discover later that no such procedure had ever been scheduled. The pattern was clear. My aunt had been running small-scale scams on family members for years, taking advantage of their love and trust to fund her lifestyle. I'd just been the latest victim, and possibly the biggest score. This revelation changed everything. It wasn't just about the $2,800 anymore. It was about a systematic pattern of deception that had been going on for years. And apparently, I'd been discussed as a particularly easy target. I decided it was time to take a more active approach. Update 3. I spent the weekend putting together a comprehensive document. It included every story I'd collected from family members, along with dates, amounts, and details about my aunt's various deceptions. I also included my own experience, complete with the bank records showing the transfer and reversal. On Monday morning, I sent this document to every adult family member I could think of. The email was professional and factual, without emotional language or personal attacks. I simply presented the evidence and let people draw their own conclusions. The response was immediate and dramatic. My phone started ringing within an hour of sending the email. Some family members were shocked by the scope of my aunt's deceptions. Others were angry that I'd aired family business in such a public way. A few admitted they'd suspected something was wrong, but hadn't wanted to rock the boat. My aunt's husband called me that afternoon. He sounded exhausted and defeated. He told me that he'd known about some of the money issues, but hadn't realized how extensive they were. He said my email had forced him to confront some uncomfortable truths about his wife's behavior. He also revealed something that explained a lot. My aunt had a gambling problem. She'd been hiding it from the family for years, funding her habit through these elaborate deceptions. The money she tried to steal from me wasn't for household expenses or emergencies. It was to cover gambling debts. This information reframed everything. My aunt wasn't just a manipulative person taking advantage of family generosity. She was someone with a serious addiction who'd been lying and stealing to feed that addiction. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it explained it. Her husband asked if I'd be willing to participate in an intervention. He said the family needed to confront her about the gambling and the lying, and that my documentation could be crucial in breaking through her denial. He also mentioned that several other family members who'd been scammed were interested in participating. I agreed to think about it. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. My aunt showed up at my door, but this time she looked different. Gone was the frantic energy I'd seen in the parking lot. She looked tired, defeated, and genuinely remorseful. She asked if she could come in and talk. Against my better judgment, I let her. She sat on my couch and told me everything. About the gambling, about the lies, about the years of deception. She said she'd started small, just borrowing a little money here and there when she was short. But the gambling had gotten worse, and the lies had gotten bigger, and eventually she'd found herself trapped in a web of deception that she couldn't escape. She said she targeted me because I was successful and generous, but also because I was trusting and unlikely to ask too many questions. She admitted that she and my mom had joked about my gullibility, and she seemed genuinely ashamed of that conversation. She apologized repeatedly, but she also asked for something I wasn't sure I could give: forgiveness and a chance to make things right. I told her that forgiveness might be possible eventually, but that trust would take much longer to rebuild. I also told her that her gambling addiction wasn't an excuse for stealing from family members, and that she needed professional help. She agreed to enter a treatment program and to make restitution to everyone she'd stolen from. She also agreed to the intervention her husband had proposed. Final update. The intervention happened 2 weeks later. 12 family members gathered in my grandmother's living room to confront my aunt about her behavior. It was one of the most difficult conversations I'd ever been part of, but it was also necessary. My aunt admitted to everything. She acknowledged the gambling addiction, the lies, the manipulation. She provided a complete accounting of everyone she'd stolen from, including amounts and dates. The total was staggering, over $15,000 stolen from family members over a 3-year period. She also entered a residential treatment program the following week. Her husband supported her decision and committed to helping her rebuild the trust she'd destroyed. As for me, I received full restitution within a month. My aunt sold some jewelry and took out a loan to pay back everyone she'd stolen from. But more importantly, the family dynamics had fundamentally changed. The incident had forced everyone to confront some uncomfortable truths about enabling behavior and the importance of boundaries. Several family members admitted they'd suspected something was wrong, but hadn't wanted to cause drama by speaking up. My relationship with my aunt is still complicated. I don't trust her the way I used to, and I probably never will. But I've seen genuine remorse from her and genuine effort to change. She's been in treatment for 6 months now and seems to be making progress. The relationship with my mom took longer to repair. She eventually admitted that she'd been wrong to participate in the jokes about my gullibility, and that she should have warned me about my aunt's behavior instead of enabling it. We've had several difficult conversations about boundaries and respect, but our relationship is stronger now than it was before. The most important change has been in how I approach family relationships. I'm still generous and willing to help, but I'm also more careful about verifying stories and setting clear boundaries. I've learned that being family doesn't give someone the right to take advantage of you, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. Looking back, I'm glad I reversed that transfer. Not because of the money, but because it forced a reckoning that was long overdue. Sometimes the only way to save a family is to be willing to break it first. The calls have stopped. The drama has settled. And I've learned that standing up for yourself doesn't make you the villain, even when some people try to make you feel like one. Family helps family, but real family doesn't steal from each other. And sometimes the most important lesson you can teach someone is that actions have consequences, even when those actions are committed by people you love.